You're live.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Santa Cruz Boardroom. Once again on the Off the Radio Show. They're back. 10th anniversary of the Soquel High Jazz Band.
On the show.
Mr. James Stewart right here.
Welcome back.
I think all the parents are here.
Parents are here. Yeah, the big parent crowd.
Dedicating the show to my friend Tara Sanchez Chappell, who sadly has been diagnosed with cancer, but she's going to kick its ass. Come on, Tara, we're rooting for you. This show's for you, sweetheart.
All right, that is awesome. Welcome, everybody. And welcome, everybody watching out there on the road. Keep two hands on the road. And Jim, we're ready. On the road.
One, two, one, two, three.
Good?
Yeah, give a letter. Who we watching here today, Neil?
Soquel High Jazz Band.
10th?
Oh, the 10th anniversary. 10 years playing on the show. Oh my God.
Every year. For 10 years.
All right. Here we go.
Y'all good there, Max? Max, good one on drums. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
think they've been practicing.
Huh? Oh, he makes them sweat. I know that. Do we know anybody that's alto that's close by?
Our lead alto player is a saxophone broke
Oh, wow.
right before the first song. So,
Do we know anybody that's
Ian and Jeremiah. So I put it out to the band. All right, let's play. And while you're doing that, I'll put out a text to the band, basically asking anybody who lives by the boardroom, if you have an alto, bring it.
Emergency alto needed. Immediately, we need an alto.
stacked? Oh, did he? Oh, yeah, it's bad.
He's bad.
He's bad. Here, let's play the upswing right now.
This is the one that broke.
It was on the solo part, part. All the weird notes are that.
Does that happen very often? Does stuff break? It does? Stuff breaks? That one breaks? All right. Yeah, that's got some deep bass. Is this our victim right here?
Is he here? Ask his dad to bring it. Tell his dad to bring it.
Don't be sad. Don't be sad.
Ask him what good is he? Yeah, ready? Here we go. The upswing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
You're getting pretty good, TC. You're getting good.
She MacGyvered it.
Huh?
She MacGyvered
What's
it.
happened? What happened?
She fixed it. Fixed it? Well done. That's a true musician right there. MacGyver.
Let's go to a little secret. You guys should say that.
Jim, how long you been teaching the band at Soquel High?
29 years. Next year's 30.
29 years. The 30, the big 3-0. All right. And how many members will be on the band next year?
There's the whole trumpet line's coming back. Asher's coming back. The trombone player. Evelyn's coming back.
Nice job, Evelyn.
The rhythm section, except we're changing our piano player and one of our guitars.
All right. So there are a few coming back. Yeah.
Ready? I call the 1, 2, 3. No feature. 3 seniors right there in trombone. So they're all going. Right on. Let's play human nature.
Thanks for tuning in, Charles. Charles says great music. Thank you for that, Charles. Yep.
Hey, say thank you to Charles.
Hey, all right. I think he liked that. If you guys are just tuning in, this is the Soquel High Jazz Band. Jim Stewart celebrating 29 years being the coach of the jazz band. And my kids actually went to Soquel High, and back then Jim was the teacher, and that band had more fun during that time. I think the big part of it is because he is such a great teacher.
to senior salsa. Take a risk for the bisque.
Is this a risky one right here? Is this okay? Okay. Go big or go home, right? Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been working on it. We've been working on this one. That's Raymond Kaplan back there on trumpet. Ray.
Jackie.
That's Mark Hansen, lead trumpet. I'm not going to announce Fergus because he's not paying attention. Are we ready?
For those of you just tuning in, the Soquel High Jazz Band with the main man, Jim Stewart. That's it right there. All right, a comment just scrolled up. These high school kids kick ass is what just rolled up on there. So that's a good little review.
Dang, we should have said that. You guys are going to play that well. Yeah. Hey, since we risked one, let's risk the next one. Let's keep putting on risks. We really.
We're really putting it out there right now? All right. Anybody scared? All right, no one's scared? All right.
Yeah, that one went pretty well. Let's try another one.
Once again, Soquel High Jazz Band live from the boardroom. The 10th anniversary of having the band on the show. Excellent.
Blackbird, yeah. Ray's gonna come up here and sing. Yeah.
All right.
You talk about cameraman tonight, Terry Champion.
You're welcome, sir. Welcome. Yeah. Fabulous show. The public is very much enjoying the show tonight.
Check that mic, Ray.
Check, check, check.
Sounds great. Live here at the boardroom, Soquel High Jazz Band, Jim Stewart, conductor extraordinaire.
I go like this for a living. Hey, Fergus. You think? Fergus on trumpet. There you go. I found it. There we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Packing up all my cares and woes, here I go, swinging low. Bye, bye, blackbird. Where somebody waits for me, sugar and sweet and so make my bed and light the light. I'll be home late tonight. Make my bed and light the light. I'll be home late tonight. Blackbird,
Great job.
Charade. We're going to do our 3 features right now.
The features?
These are features after Ray and Kevin there. This is Antonio Plaza, a.k.a. Tony. Tony P.
Tony's a senior.
Tony is the senior. He's going to Brown next year.
All right, congrats.
He's the 3rd brother that have gone through our program in how many years? The last 20 years? Yeah.
Wow, really?
He was 1 when I met his older brother.
So my wife said there's 2 things that make Soquel High famous: water polo and the band.
There you go.
That's what she said. Yep. And she's a Soquel alumni. Yeah. Oh yeah. All right.
Class of 1982.
82?
82.
I'm 82 also.
Are you?
Yep.
That was a good year. Okay, ready, guys? Charade. Hold on. I'll be mad.
There's only 1,000 people watching. No pressure.
1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, go.
was awesome. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Hey, can we play one by one for them? Because we played them here, but we don't play.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's play one by one, and then we'll do your feature. You got like 4 more. That's all over you. Cool.
Once again, those tuning in, Soquel High Jazz Band, live from the boardroom, right here in beautiful Pleasure Point. This is the 10th annual show, having the jazz band here. Hope you guys are enjoying the show. Give you a quick tour of some of the amazing artwork and skateboards on display here at the boardroom. Up here on
Try to blend. You got something in there. 1, 2, I want 2, 3, and. So this band's going to be down to Zelda's on Wednesday.
Got a gig.
Wednesday the 21st, 4:30 to 5:30.
All right.
Now you on Zelda's.
All right. What day of the week is that?
Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Next Wednesday, 4:30 to 5. 21st.
It's probably a nice happy hour during that time, I'm sure.
Music sounds even better.
Uh-huh. With the frothy cold one. For the adults, of course. Yes, root beer. Frothy root beer on the porch. Those of you tuning in, Soquel High Jazz Band. Live here from the Santa Cruz Boardroom on the Off the Lip Radio Show. Neil Perlberg over there. What's up, buddy? Jim Stewart right here. 29 years being the head dude running this band. Good job.
I do Mongo and then press trigger. Hey, by the way, good job playing a lot of music today. Oh. Just forgot your stand.
Yeah, you should have just
All right, for those of you just tuning in, we're live from the Santa Cruz Boardroom with the Soquel High Jazz Band, and we are live on Santa Cruz Waves. Neil Perlberg over there, enjoying the show. Shoreline's coming next. Hey, the kids are the future.
Kids of the future, right?
1, 2, 3, bam.
Last one?
Last song. The Special Cooker features Ruben there on piano and Max back there on drums.
And next Wednesday we're at Zelda's.
Zelda's 4:30 to 5:30 on the patio.
All right.
You guys got these instruments? We got ice. We got ice.
Last song for the Soquel High Jazz Band here live at the Santa Cruz Boardroom on the Off the Lip Radio Show. How's the show treating you, Neil?
Good, buddy.
You like it? Okay.
So dedicated to Tara, so twice to you.
Get healthy, Tar.
Kids are good. Good band this year. It's got every year.
Hey, who's going to keep playing music after high school? Raise your hand. All right. That's a pretty good survey. You didn't raise your hand? Whoa. That was quick. That was quick.
Stuck it up in the air.
Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, go.
Wow, that was an amazing show. Jim, thanks for coming back. Yeah. And, Wednesday at Zelda's 4 to 5. Is that what I heard? 4:30 to 5:30 at Zelda's. Great job, you guys. That was amazing. Everybody loved it online. So we love having you guys here. For the seniors, congratulations. We'll see all the rest of you here next year, right? That's for the 30th.
Before you pack up, we need everybody up here.
We do a group photo.
Hey, group photo. Let's give you 2 photos.
Neil, we're going to sign off right now. Good show. Okay, we'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Off Lip Radio Show. We will see you next time.